Welcome everyone to today's webcast, How User Behavior Analytics and User Activity Monitoring Promotes Effective Incident Response, sponsored by Veriato. I'm your host, Nick Cavalancia from Tech Evangelism. Now before we get started with today's webcast, let's cover a few housekeeping details. First off, today's webinar is being recorded, so expect an email in the next few days with the link of the recording. Today's slides, as well as a number of the resources, should be available shortly in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. So feel free to download those once you see them there in that section. And then lastly, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. We're going to cover those questions at the end of today's presentation, but it's good to use the question section of the control panel throughout the webinar. That way you've got the question nice and contextual based on what you're thinking about, what you're hearing in today's webcast, and make sure you submit any questions that you have, and again, we'll take those at the end of the webcast today. Now we've got two great speakers today. A bit later you're going to hear from Mike Peral. He's a senior sales engineer from Veriato, but first up is Derek Smith. Now Derek's got over 30 years in the security industry. He's a former government agent. He's a cybersecurity SME. He holds a number of certifications, CISSP, Security Plus, etc., etc. He's got 8 college degrees. You heard that right. He's the definition of an overachiever. He's also a published author, conference speaker, cybersecurity analyst for several international and local television news stations. He's a government program manager and more, as if there's more that the man could be doing. But you can follow him on Twitter at Derek A. Smith 1. And with that, you guys, you're set for a treat today. Derek, take things away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Nick. Thanks for having me today. And everyone, thanks for spending your time and being here with us today. So I'm going to get started. I don't want to waste a lot of time. Nick has said all there is to say about me. I was like, who is that guy he's talking about? But anyway, let's get started. I want to talk to you today about how I can help you make your incident response better and how that can be done by using user behavior analytics. So I'm going to get right into my slide deck here. I see people are still coming in, so people will be joining us throughout. But let me just get started here. So again, that's me. I'm Derek Smith. I don't have to say anything else about me. But I love this cybersecurity stuff, and I love helping people like you build better cybersecurity within your organizations. I like educating you about these different types of things and the different types of ways you can make cybersecurity better for yourself, and hopefully not end up in the news like a lot of these other companies that we're seeing now. We turn on the news every single day, and we find a new company, a new large company. We're not even hearing about the small ones that's had a super breach. We look at Uber just last week. 57 million records were lost, were stolen. They weren't lost, they were stolen. 57 million. We hear about Experian and Equifax and Sony and all these things. We don't want to become the next victim or the next news story. So let me tell you how we can respond to some of these incidences as we run across them. Now, first, let's just talk about incident response in general and what we're seeing in the numbers out here in the market today and what's happening out here. Also, when you get a chance, you can download my white paper that I wrote about this at Veriato as well. But most insiders, they're not doing it for bad reasons. They're not making mistakes. Well, I won't say making mistakes, but taking your information for nefarious reasons or by intentional reasons. Okay. But what's happening is that their negligence or their lack of attention to cybersecurity is making them the weakest link in our security chains, in your security chains, right? So, for example, look today at the news headlines. We see about ransomware every day. And as a matter of fact, when I talked about Uber, they were taken by a ransomware attack. But ransomware infects our IT systems through negligence. And that's through negligence of our insiders clicking on email links that when they first look at them, they seem innocuous. But unfortunately, they oftentimes deliver dangerous payloads as the desired file is being downloaded. You might get your file, you might get your music, but once you download it, you're also getting something else that you don't want to get by some type of virus or some other malicious activity. Think about Paya or WannaCry. Those ransomware attacks are out there not too long ago. So if you look at the slide I have in front of you, this shows you who those individuals who threaten to secure your IT system are and your network and your digital assets. And if you notice in the orange section, it says here that only 38% of threats come from attackers outside the organization. Now, I'll say this, 38% are a lot of people, but only 38% comes from the outside. And what does that mean to us? That means that a whopping, I have 60%, but a whopping 62% of all cyber incidents are caused by insiders. And let me kind of break that down for you a little bit of how that works out. So only 38% of the threat, you see that again in the orange, comes from outside, right? So 2% comes, which is the green section, comes from what I call credentialed imposters. And those are criminals posing inside your company as employees. And I spent 18 years as a federal agent, so you might sit there and think, well, nobody does that. Nobody poses inside an organization or comes to get hired just so that they can steal our intellectual property. But let me tell you this, as a former federal agent, that is not true. That does indeed happen. So a credentialed imposter is an individual who sought and gained employment within your company, and their main reason, their main purpose is to infiltrate your company's security and access your confidential and other digital assets. Okay. Now, usually they're not going to be the vice president or someone big that's going to stand out. They're going to be those low-level employees. I don't mean stature or anything, but they're going to seek out jobs where they're not going to be noticed. They want to be able to hide in plain sight, and then they walk around and they're going to be stealing things. So while employed, they're going to seek to access your digital assets, as many of them as possible, so they can covertly swindle or manipulate or steal or by other means acquire increasingly higher system access credentials from you. 14%, as you see highlighted by the yellow, comes from insiders with criminal or malicious intent, people who intend to harm you. Let's face it, some of our employees have bad attitudes, or they develop bad attitudes over time. And these individuals, even though they're a minority, they can pose a significant risk to your organization because they intend to use their authorization and access to assets for their criminal or malicious purposes. Or even if it's not criminal, it could be malicious because they're upset they didn't get a raise, they didn't get a promotion, and they just want to hurt the company. Right? And then a whopping 46% comes from negligent insiders. These are employees and other people who make legitimate mistakes. So almost half of the data losses and the data breaches you experience in your organization comes from simple mistakes, people. Simple mistakes. How do we deal with that? Let's keep moving on. I won't cover all of these, but there's some other key incident findings that's out there also. Basically, 90% of organizations feel vulnerable to insider attack. 90%. That's a big number out there. Even though we have all this technology and everything else we put in place, 90% still feel vulnerable. The main enabling risk factors include having too many users with excessive privileges, 37% of those, increasing number of devices with access to sensitive data. Think about bringing your own device policies. How do I control all these telephones and iPads and iPods and whatever else that are out there from infiltrating our organization and exfiltrating with our data? Okay? Another one is the increasing complexity of information technology. It's just getting harder to understand all this stuff. I work in the technology field, and I still don't know how to handle most of the stuff, half the things, over half that comes out on a daily basis. Okay? Just a couple more things I want to cover on this slide, but 53% majority have confirmed insider attacks against their organization in the previous 12 months. Did you get that? 53% confirmed that there's been some type of incident within their organization within the last 12 months. And they say typically less than 5 attacks, but how many do you need? And these are probably just the ones that's getting reported. Now, last I want to point out on this slide, and I have it in red there, that the use of user behavior monitoring, what I'm talking about today, is growing. People are starting to get it. People are starting to know that I can't only spend money on outside activities, I have to spend money looking at what's happening inside my organization also. So 94% of organizations now deploy some method of monitoring users. Now, I don't know if it's all user behavior analytics like I'm talking to you today, but 94% are doing something. I'm going to tell you how to do the right thing today. And 93% monitor access to sensitive data. So let's look at some of the consequences that we have with all these different things that's going on, with people trying to get into our organization, with insiders being a threat, 46% of people making mistakes. What are the consequences? Well, 56% purposely initiated with criminal or malicious intent. 56% of incidences were done because they wanted to do something criminal or they wanted to do something malicious. And now I'm talking just about your insiders here, okay? I'm talking about people who work for your organization. The result, 23 significant asset-threatening cyber incidents happening every year, okay? And that's a lot. 23. How many does it take in your organization to be the one that puts you out of business? Especially if you're not a large organization that can weather the storm. Think about this. When you go and look at an organization getting a threat, what is a breach, what is the first thing they do? A lot of them give you services where you can check your credit for a year or something like that. Let me think about this. Uber has 57 million records that were compromised. So let's say 50 million of them were employees that I have to, not employees, but customers that I have to give Equifax or TransUnion or something to. How much money is that costing my organization? That's not even taking into consideration whatever was stolen, if anything was stolen. 26% probability of material data loss in your organization. And the cost of a data breach, get this, the cost of a data breach could hit the $4 million mark. So yes, I'm trying to give you these numbers because I want to scare you, because it is scary. I want you to think about the different activities that's going on out there, and I want you to think about the things that you can do. You know, the investment you make in trying to stop these types of things from happening is probably nowhere near what you would pay for just one data breach should it happen. And I hate to be cliche, but what do they always say? It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And you want to be prepared for when it does. All right, so what are they looking for when they get into our organizations? Well, I mean, we pretty much have a good idea. They want to steal everything they can get their hands on if they can. But I want to give you some factual numbers from something that Veriato did when they did a research study on this. Basically, data is no longer just an asset within your organization. What is it for us as a business? It's our core strategic asset. And some types of data are more valuable than others, of course, right? One of the most important things I tell people they have in their list, in their organization, is their customer list. If everything else fails, if I still have my customer list, I could be back in business pretty quickly because I can contact them again, make some more sales. So it's going to be more valuable than, say, you know, I don't know, Derek Smith's name on as the janitor working for the company. I can't think of anything right now, but what I'm trying to say is that if you look here at the slide, your confidential business information, which encompasses your company financials along with your customer and your employee data that I just spoke about, that is a highly strategic asset, and it has a high value for you, and it's also a high value target for people who want to get their hands on it. Again, and in the study that they did, confidential business information this year, 57% takes the top spot as the most vulnerable to insider attack. I'm not talking about people on the outside, insider attack. Because your people know what you have inside. They know where the goods are, they know where the keys to the kingdom are, and they know how to find them, and they're already inside, so it's easy for them to get their hands on them. And by the way, when I talk about insider, not just your people, but remember those infiltrators, when they get user credentials and they look like they're on the inside, they're part of the threat as well. That's followed by 52% of your privileged account information. Privileged accounts are also very important for protection. Followed by intellectual property, employee data, and your operational and infrastructure data falls into place there as well. Your biggest enabler, what's causing these problems to happen? Why is it happening? Now, I want to preface this by saying this. Most of you, if not all of you, listening to this call are pretty cybersecurity savvy. You know, we feel like we got it together. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years now. I feel like, hey, I got it together. I know what I'm doing. But if I know what I'm doing, why do we have these high numbers of 90% of people still feeling that they're a threat, that they're threatened, that they're vulnerable, and 56% of people inside still stealing things from us? Somewhere we're missing the point. We're missing the boat. So let's look at what enables these things to happen. And as I say here, the biggest enabler of accidental insider threats. This is just the accidents that I talked about, the 56%. Well, the most common culprit is accidental exposure by employees. So cybersecurity experts view phishing attempts that you see here, 67%, as the biggest vulnerability for accidental insider threats. Phishing attacks, what they do is they trick employees into sharing sensitive company information by posing as a legitimate business or a trusted contact. And they often contain some type of malware attachment or ransomware or hyperlink or something. Let me tell you a quick story. Maybe less than a month ago, I was at my job and something came up on my computer and it said, Derek, someone at your organization has put you in for an award. And I'm like, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know better. I'm like, an award, somebody put me in for an award. That's great. Now I'm sitting there thinking, but you know what? This is probably a phishing scam. This is probably not true. So what do you all think I did? I'm going to give you a second just to think. As the 30-year expert that I am, I went and I clicked it. I couldn't help it. It was clickbait. I clicked it. And what happened is that a banner came up saying, if this was a real phishing attempt, you'd have fallen a victim. Those weren't the exact words, but basically I fell for the scam. And the thing is, maybe 2 weeks before that, we had training on this stuff. We gave the whole organization, I work for the IRS, we gave 40,000 employees training on this. I'm one of the guys doing the training, and I fell for this myself. So why do you think 56% of employees are still failing? Because we're not, you know, because we can't just rely on the human anymore. You can't rely on Derek to do the right thing or your employee to do the right thing. We have to have another means of making sure that the right thing is done, enforcing that the right thing is done. And I'm going to talk about that as we go on. All right, so 67% phishing attempts, 56% weak reused passwords. Still doing the same thing. Let me tell you, at work I have to maintain about 15 to 20 passwords. Now, how many of those do you think I can keep in my brain at 54 years old? Not a whole lot. So what do you think Derek even does? I violate some of the policies myself by probably reusing passwords that I just couldn't remember. They're not weak. I make them pretty strong. But, you know, am I following all the right things, the right ways to try to remember 15 to 20 of them? No, you probably have 15 to 20 duplicated passwords, reused passwords. That's why 56% is it was one of the biggest enablers. I'm a person just like everybody else here. 44% unlocked devices. Get up, walk away, I'll be right back. I can leave we use cat cards. I can leave my card in here. I'm just going to run over to the copy machine. 44% end up being the cause of a breach. Don't do it. 44% bad password sharing practices, and 32% unsecured Wi-Fi networks. Okay? And even with that, you can go in right now at your desk and probably look for Wi-Fi networks, and you'll see there's a few that you can get into that's probably open. Now the problem is, why is it a breach problem? Because when I do that, it probably was a trap that someone set for me. I went on and now they're monitoring everything I do and probably using that as an entryway into my organization. Couple more enablers. Too many users with excessive access privileges. I once worked at the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, and I was the system security officer there. And I found that the head of the agency, the head of my part of the agency, he had system administrator rights to everything within TSA. And I went to someone and said, well, why does he have this? They said, well, you're going to tell him different? Are you going to tell him he can't have it? And I said, well, that's my job. Sure, I'm going to tell him. And when I went and told him, he couldn't wait for me to get rid of it. He didn't even understand what I was talking about. He's like, Derek, I didn't know I had this. I don't know why I have it, and I definitely don't need it if you told me the consequences. The problem is people aren't educated, and other people are afraid to tell folks that they shouldn't be using certain things. Too many users with excessive access privileges. We have increasing numbers of devices I talked about. Technology is more complex, and all those things that I've been talking to you about already enabling us or enabling those insider attacks or insider attackers to take advantage of our networks, our systems, our enterprises. Here's the frightening reality. And I told you this up front, but I really want to emphasize it here. With all that we do, I don't know if you're cybersecurity professionals, I don't know if you're business owners, I don't know what your status is, but with all that we do, 90% still feel vulnerable to insider attacks. They feel like they're extremely vulnerable. This breaks it down. Very vulnerable, moderate, but all of us have a fear of vulnerability within our organization. Why is that? You know, you spend, and let me say that, I want to take a step back for a second and talk about Uber again. A couple of days ago, the chief security officer and his staff was fired from Uber. See, in our field with cybersecurity, you know, I love the field, it's a great field, but somebody has to be the scapegoat. And I won't even call it a scapegoat. It is our job to ensure that those type of breaches don't happen. Now, he didn't. Now, I told you it's not when, it's if it's going to happen. So it's going to happen. You know. So, but the problem they had there, real quick, was that they kept it secret for over a year. Okay, they paid a hefty ransom and they kept it secret for a year. The thing is, we have to deal with these problems. We have to deal with them quickly. We have to deal with them now, and we have to deal with them the right way. But the point is that it's going to happen, and 90% of us fear it happening and fear when it's going to happen. Okay, let's move to the next one here. I'll get out of these statistics in just a second. So what I want to do is I want to take a look now at the landscape here. So how is this happening? As you see, what I have here is that external threat, that's just a small part of it. That's just what we see on the surface. What's really happening, what's really costing us, is happening behind the scenes, that insider threat. Number one, I won't say number one, I want to rank these, but privileged users. And those are the folks that we give the keys to the kingdom to. They need access to do their job. But what I've seen oftentimes in organizations is when I go to do an inspection, the privileged user, they have a user's account and they have a privileged user account. And I'll observe, and these guys will be surfing the net. They're sitting there bored, number one, right now. They don't have a call. They're surfing the net, and they're doing it with their privileged account because the user account is probably blocked. They can't go see the things they want to see and do the things they want to do online, so they use their privileged account. So if a bad guy compromises that account, now they become, guess what? A super user themselves, a privileged user in your organization, just like that system administrator. Third parties. Target happened because of third-party activity. You know, Target can spend millions of dollars. Sony can spend millions of dollars on security measures. But is the air conditioning company that has access to your network spending that amount of money? Is the janitorial service that can log in and do their time sheets or whatever on your system, do they have that kind of protection? We have to see what our third parties are doing. We have to ensure that they're taking the same type of measures that we take. But the thing is, they become an insider. They're inside our organization. And of course, our employees. This is the threat landscape. This is what it looks like for us for the insider threat. But guess where we spend most of our money? Our money is spent looking at the outside. So, time is the most important cybersecurity incident factor. When I have a security incident, it's time that matters, okay? Cyber attacks, data breaches, all those happen because of the compromise of an IT system over time. So the time to compromise that IT system can be measured in minutes. And now it's even worse than that if they're using bots or other scaled automation is being involved. That time can be pushed down to mere seconds for somebody to break in. You can go out on the internet and find tools that can help you break into people's enterprises, especially if they're not covered correctly. So if the compromise results in data exfiltration, the company may be probably hemorrhaging, bleeding confidential consumer information or trade secrets or your pre-publication financials that you don't want them to see yet, or your strategic plans for your business, or just your employee social security numbers, and whatever else they might be looking for these days. Now, as you see in the bottom, the very sobering reality is that on average, the time to discover that a compromise took place in your organization is not measured in minutes. It's not even measured in days. It's measured in months and sometimes even years before you find out that they've been there taking stuff on a daily basis. And even more than that, the time it takes to contain the incident, specifically the time to root out the discovered compromise from your IT system, is measured in days and weeks also, or even months. It takes a while to do this. So what's happening during that time? They're going to cost your company millions of dollars probably in lost business, if not just money directly, lost business, lost opportunities, tarnished reputations. You might have lawsuits that come out because of this. All these things can be detrimental to your business. I know some of you might be small businesses, and they can actually wipe your business out. Okay? These costs are in addition to that of the loss of compromised digital assets that you might have, or the direct incident containment costs that I'm going to have involved here. So as you see, it's going to cost me a great deal of money. When it comes to responding to your incident, again, time is the most important factor. Now let's take a look at response and how that works. So this is what I call the incident response life cycle. So the core of incident response lifecycle is four things. We have to detect it, we have to contain it, we have to analyze it, and then we have to notify people about it. And yeah, you do have to tell people. I have to tell you that. You can't wait a year like happened with Uber and a lot of other organizations. It's just not Uber. I'm just using them because they're the most recent incident. But it happens with a lot of different companies, and I will venture to say with most companies. I worked for Booz Allen, and I worked for Computer Science Corporation. I would go from organization to organization versus both government and commercial and see these same type of things repeated over and over again. So let's look at detection. Detection is where we actually find out that there's an incident that has occurred within our organization. Something is happening, and let me say this: an incident is something that has actually occurred. Okay, we can get a trigger, we can see there might be some activity, but now I'm talking about something has actually occurred. Somebody's gotten into your enterprise and maybe taking things out. I'm talking about insider or outsider. So it says that it takes 69 days. This is the average amount of time from incident occurrence until discovery. On average is 69 days. Now, if you work in the healthcare field, it's 114 days. And non-healthcare is about 46. Why more for healthcare? Because healthcare is mostly concentrated, I'm just thinking, this is from Derek, mostly concentrated on healthcare and not IT security. So they might not have the right people or the most sophisticated people to detect these type of things. They probably don't have an incident response team or incident response center at the hospital like some of the other companies might have. Now, I'm just guessing that, and I'll say this, healthcare is becoming more sophisticated and are starting to see how they need to do these things. But 114 days for them to detect it. Next step is contain it. So once I find that it's happening, I have to stop the hemorrhaging. I have to stop the bleeding. I have to stop other stuff from going outside of my organization. The average amount of time from discovery until containment, until fixing this problem, well, I'll take that back. I'm not even fixing it. I'm just stopping the bleeding right now, is on average 7 days. The next step is analysis. So once I stop the bleeding, once I have containment, I have to figure out what went wrong. Why did it go wrong? What actually happened? What have we lost? You know, how have we been compromised? You know, who do I have to tell? Those type of things have to happen next. So you see the average amount of time from engagement of our forensics team into our forensic investigation complete is on average 43 days. Now think about this. Most of your organizations probably don't have a forensics team. So now it's going to cost me money to hire a team. It's going to cost time for them to get there and respond to my incident. And then it's going to cost time, time and money to fix it. And remember, I may not be up and running during this time. Remember the last step? I only contained the problem. Am I back up and running yet? I'm not sure, because if I haven't found out what the problem was and how they infiltrated me, and if they're still in my system, I may be down. And again, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't know your size, of lost business is occurring during that time. Next is notification. I got to tell people. The average amount of time to tell people from discovery to notification is about 40 days for all matters. A little different for healthcare and non-healthcare, but they're very close. The average number of people I have to tell, get this, 269,000 plus that I have to notify that their records have been stolen, that they're at risk of their identities being stolen, or money being stolen from their account, or their healthcare records being compromised. And then notifications, how do I do them? It says by mail or substitute, notifications provided. I usually have to put out 146 notifications to people around it. I'm going to spend my whole year just doing notifications of a breach that occurred. And that might be the first one. I got 2 to 5 more to go for the year, according to the statistics. And then, of course, lawsuits. The average is 9. Now, I showed these 4 steps. This may not be your 4 steps, but this is generally what has to take place in an organization in order for us to take care or mitigate an incident. Now, what's some challenges that we have for incident response? And again, these are in the white paper if you want to download it, but the top 5 challenges I found when I was doing my research to write the paper falls into these categories. First of all, correctly identifying an actual incident. Remember I told you it could be noise, it could be something happening, but I don't have a real incident yet. So traditional cybersecurity monitoring systems, they have difficulty actually correctly differentiating between what's an actual incident and what's that noise. And we have to try to first figure out what that is. That's a challenge for us. The second challenge is analyzing all relevant incident data to try to figure out what happened and what the intention of the bad guys were. Did they really want to steal something? Did they really want to do bad? Or is it just somebody, a script kiddie or something playing around? So often the only computer logs available to the forensic investigation team I spoke about are from the firewalls or the other technologies whose principal function is to mitigate outside attackers. But those records are going to contain little, probably no information regarding events that occurred with the threat actors that I talked to you about earlier. We have to identify what compromised the system in the first place, what compromised our digital assets. Okay? Why did this happen and how can I fix it? We have to quantify the potential technological and business impact of the incident. Okay? Do I need to buy some more stuff? Do I have some sleeper malware somewhere left behind that I have to go take care of? We have to do some type of thorough analysis that can be done for the compromised system and that compromised incident that we're speaking of. And of course, conduct a thorough investigation. Do you even have the people to do a thorough investigation? I hope so. You have to get this done. You have to find out the who, what, when, and why. You already know where on your network, but where are they really? There's some rootkits back there. Was it done from somebody's Bluetooth connection? When they brought the devices in with BYOB. Not BYOB, I'm sorry, BYOD. What am I thinking about today? All right, so we have to conduct a thorough investigation as well. Now, let me show you some mistakes that I see that happens oftentimes out in the industry. So promptness, as I told you, the time, that's key to incident response. But promptness at the cost of effectiveness is no win for the organization. I want to be prompt. I need to move fast, but I need to take enough time as needed in order to make sure that I'm covering what needs to be covered. Okay? So I want you to avoid these 3 costly mistakes that I identify here and in the white paper. The first one is what I have here. I'm sorry. Is pulling the plug too early. Okay? Stopping my investigation too early. So computers operate on electrical power, right? So if an attacker manages to get past your established defenses that you have, the initial response to a lot of people who are not sophisticated enough and don't know is to shut off the power rather than risk further data exfiltration or other harmful attacker activity. When I was a federal agent, one of the first things I used to do when I came up to a crime scene, and this was 20, 25 years ago, we would walk up to the system and unplug the system. Now, think about this these days. You know how much information and evidence I lost by doing that? But we didn't know what we didn't know, and that's what I'm telling you today. So while cutting the power may initially stop the attacker's current activity, the consequences of doing this is going to put the organization into a worse position. Okay? Cutting the power is going to result, as I told you from our forensic investigations years ago, in loss of information that's stored on that volatile memory. And we might need that information as a forensic person to do our investigation and try to figure out what happened, what went wrong. The second thing is losing the log files. A lot of people do not like going back and reviewing logs, and they don't like having a trained person who knows how to read the logs, because you got to know how to read them as well. But losing the logs are going to have all the activity that happened before, during, and after the event occurred. Okay, when it comes to identifying the actors who did this stuff and the intent behind the incident and what containment was necessary, those logs are going to be very valuable to you. Now, some bad guys go and they try to alter or delete your logs, so you have to have protection there too. But I'm just pointing out the logs are very important, and that's one of the mistakes people make, losing those logs. And then treating the incident lightly. Every incident, regardless of whether or not it resulted in a breach, was caused by some type of neglect or some type of nefarious motive, or was an inside or outside event, but it's a learning experience for your organization. You need to take those lessons learned, and you need to learn more about how you can prevent this from happening the next time. You need to know how to put your defenses up so you can make sure that a breach does not occur in the future. So this learning phase, this collection of information phase, is going to be very, very important for our organization. Getting those logs, very, very important for our organization. All right, now I know I'm beating that to death, but it's important for me to make sure that you understand that. Real quick, not real quick, not too quick, but 9 components of how you can be compromise ready. And now this is, let me do a drum roll. This is what we've been waiting for. How do we make sure that these type of compromises do not happen? Now, the first thing I have up here is what I want to talk to you about today, and that's using user behavior analytics and tools and solutions to try to figure out what's happening before it even happens. Think about the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they would get this ball down or whatever it was, and it would tell them that someone's going to commit a crime even before that crime was committed. Now, they took it to the extreme in the movie, and they went and arrested somebody for a crime that they haven't even committed yet. But the thing is, we could probably step in and put something in place or do some type of intervention that can help us avoid insider threat or insider activity or problems before they become an issue. Okay. Another thing we have here is preventative and detective security capabilities. We want to be able to detect and prevent things. Well, first of all, prevent them from happening in the first place using UBA and UAM if we can, and then making sure that we detect when a problem does occur. Okay. We need to gather that threat information. We need to do personnel awareness and training, and not just once, not just that once a year training, not just hanging a sign up in the lunchroom, but we need to do things where we can touch them multiple times. I'm an educator. I've been teaching for over 30 years in college and university. You have to have multiple touch points in order to change behavior. And what we're trying to do is change behavior with our personal awareness and training. Not just teach them or entertain them, but you want them to not push on that thing that I selected when I thought I had an award. You want them to do better than I did. But we have to do that by constantly training folks, constantly going back to them. Proactive security assessments. Do our assessments. Focus on identifying the location of your critical assets, know where they are, and then implement safeguards that's going to protect them. Assess and oversee your vendors that I spoke about. Develop practices for incident response. Develop your plans. Understand your current and emerging regulatory hot buttons that's out there. And if you don't already have it, you might want to look into getting some cyber liability insurance. You know, this is not what this is all about, but these are some things that I would look into, some 9 things that I would put on your list in order to try to make it better for your organization so you won't be part of that 90% that's worried about this activity. All right, next 3 areas where you can improve. Number 1, use UBA to detect your inside incidents sooner. I told you it takes 100 days or whatever number I gave you to know that people were in there in the first place. Well, I want to detect it day 1. I want to see the activity as soon as possible so I can do something about it. You want to contain them faster. I told you step 2 was containment. I need to contain them faster after detection. That's where we can improve. And number 3 is I want to keep good logs to facilitate more precise determination of what happened. But you know what? One thing I don't have in here that should have been number 1, it says detect them sooner, but I want to prevent them. I want to not detect, but I want to prevent them from happening in the first place by using my UBA to predict who might be a threat in the first place, and then I can intervene before it even happens. So that should be up there as number 1. All right. So I just want to show here that people are getting smart. They are starting to use UBA, and it is becoming more prevalent out on the outside because people are smart. They know that their insider threat, as you saw, is the bigger landscape, so maybe I should spend more money on the bigger landscape. And UBA provides many solutions for you. But first of all, what is it? Just to make sure we're on the same page, there it says are comprised of advanced algorithms and machine learning which can approximate human insightfulness. I'm going to let Mike tell you a little bit more about that. But we're using machine learning, we're using machine to try to figure out, just like the movie Minority Report, what's going to happen before it even happens. Okay? To work properly, they have to have accurate information about individual users because they look for anomalies. They look for how your behavior changes. They look for things that you are doing different. So in order to do that, they're going to store and collect information about your activities, not the week before an incident happens, but on an ongoing basis. Okay? Major tasks in managing UBA involves setting appropriate alert thresholds in the first place. Garbage in, garbage out, folks. So let's make sure we put the right stuff in. Okay? Monitoring our third-party activity, monitoring the exfiltration of data, seeing what's going out. You know, nobody's looking at what Snowden was taking out. Let's look at what's taken out. Detecting the use of compromised credentials and preventing the misuse of high privileged accounts within our organization. Okay? A couple of best practices: mitigate incidents, get a detailed record of your employee interaction, like I talked about. Watch what they're doing. mitigate insider threats, increase monitoring by increasing the monitoring of your employees. I'm not saying being Big Brother and watching everything they do, every phone call, every website, but you have to monitor certain types of activity that you're going to set up in those thresholds and monitor it at all times. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring Mike in. I want Mike to tell us about how Veriato uses user behavior activity. I'm with them because they're one of the best ones out there, the best I've seen, and I love being part of this organization and helping, helping represent them by doing webinars like this that I'm doing today. So, Mike, I'm going to take it away. Mike might be on mute. He should be coming on any second now.
There we go. I was having a hard time unmuting myself. Let me go ahead and change my screen over here. All right, so getting into the user behavioral analytics as far as what Veriato does and how we can help. We have two products, Veriato 360 and Recon. They basically help mitigate some of those situations that Derek had mentioned earlier. The main thing I want to focus on in the beginning here is how Veriato Recon can actually utilize advanced machine learning and those algorithms to give you a detailed statistical analysis to discover some of the potential insider compromises that he was speaking of. Most of the time we can do this before it happens. We can also start recording and telling you with alerts that it's actually happening at that time as well. Most organizations don't have anything in place for user behavioral analytics. A lot of their stuff, they have traditional defenses for security technology, but they can't detect some of these insider threats, let alone predict some of these actions from happening ahead of time. That's where the machine learning and the computer learning comes in handy, that we can actually have advanced algorithms to give you this information. What we're doing with Veriato's 360 Recon, we're monitoring every user that's in the environment. So we're automating what's happening out there. We're automating some of these processes. We're actually monitoring what's actually happening for those users, or anything that happens on a machine based on a keyword alert or something that's typed on a keyboard, or emails that are being accessed, or websites that we're going to. We can set up alerts and monitor users based on some of that behavior. Based on that behavior, we can do things in the environment as well. So if somebody goes in and is going to a website a certain amount of times, or is, they're accessing things that they shouldn't be accessing, we can alert whoever needs to be alerted about that information, and they take the necessary precautions to mitigate some of those risks that are out there as well. One of the main things that we could touch upon as far as UBA goes is the actual ability to flag, it's a big word, psycholinguistic anomalies that are out there. Basically what that is on a daily basis, as users, as people, as humans, we go through the day from a standpoint of utilizing words like us, or team, or me, things that are a little bit more helpful for the environment, helpful for the company itself. During that time, as things get a little bit, I guess you could say, distasteful, and a little bit, people are a little bit more unhappy in the environment, you'll start to see that their behavior changes. The way that they use those words, the way that they talk, the way that their emails go, start to become more like an I, or hate, or a little bit more drastic for things like that. And we can actually have predictable analysis for that type of stuff, so we can actually go ahead and alert and say, hey, Tom was out there, he used to be happy a couple weeks ago, I don't know what's going on now, why is he having all of these me, hate attacks, things like that, going to places, maybe he's going to job sites as well, maybe he's not happy with his current situation. In the environment, we can, or in Veriato, we can actually go through and say, hey, maybe you should take a look at this, maybe take a hard look at what's going on with Tom, and ask him a few questions of maybe why he's having such a hard time with work itself, and why this sudden changes happen in the environment as well. We do keep as far as the system itself goes, we actually keep a 30-day rolling on each local computer to help, if we need to go back in time, or if we need to actually record things that are happening, or be alerted on something that's happened previously, we actually have this recording out there, this data set that sits on those machines, and then we can actually upload it to the centralized machine that allows you to, do the analytics and report on this type of information that's happening in the environment as well. And this information I'll actually show you that's happening in the product itself when I switch over to the product. You'll also notice that we can do some screen recordings utilizing Veriata 360. We can define the frequency of that information, and we can also set up triggers, once again, to start the screen capturing, as well as the alerting on what's happening in the environment as well. And this basically just gets to the point where you can actually be proactive in the environment for these types of threats, anything from a user behavioral analytics standpoint or things that you want to be monitoring for in the environment when users are accessing sensitive information or keywords that you want to be alerted on. We can help mitigate that type of information and try to be a little bit more proactive of what's actually happening with your end users, or in most of your cases, your customers as well. All right, I'll switch over to the actual product itself here. Give you an idea of what we're kind of put a picture to some of these words. So what you're looking at here is Veriata 360. What I wanted to show you guys first is what we're actually capturing, so it could kind of give you an idea and some contextual ideas of what we're actually capturing. So you can see things like screenshots, the chat. We can take a look at websites that are visiting, email activity, files that are being transferred, keystrokes that have been typed, any program activity. Anytime someone launches a certain program that we've either approved of or not approved of, user status, and then document tracking, and if you needed to get into network activity as well. We do have the ability to block some certain things. We can block things that are happening in the environment, things like if we don't want users visiting websites, chat, IM, internet access, some cloud access as well. So if you don't want people going to certain places to drop things off like Box or OneDrive, we can block the access to some of those sites from transferring data as well. Now, once we've gone out and set these policies in place and we put the recorders out on those machines and recording this information, we can then report on things that are happening. The main thing I'll focus on here is some of the anomalies. So we have anything from email anomalies to compromised credentials. We have a lot of things out of the box that allow you that we can go through and report on. What I wanted to bring up is that we actually have a couple ways to look at things that are happening. We have what we call an anomaly that compares each user to themselves. We have an anomaly that compares each user to a group, and then compromised credentials. The compromised credentials basically just goes through and says, okay, if you have a user that we've stipulated, or if we want to monitor all users that do certain things in the environment. So a user is logged on normally, hasn't logged in. Typically, this is going to be if you have users that log in one place and then all of a sudden, for some reason, log in somewhere else at the same time. We can alert you on this and tell you what's going on based on the location or an unusual location. Normally, most people aren't going to be logging into a server or something from two different separate locations. When this does happen, most of the time you should be suspect of something happening in the environment, and we can alert you on that type of information. When we start getting into the users on users or any sort of anomaly like that, this is basically setting up the same set of settings. We can go through and say, okay, we want to compare each user to themselves. So what this basically means is that Tom, for instance, keep picking on Tom, but Tom does things a certain way every day. He comes in, does, sit down, has his coffee, answers a few emails, does this, does that, copies files over here. He has a normal task. When he goes out of that normal daily task, when his threshold is a little bit out of the 5% deviation, we're going to go ahead and, based on that activity that we're monitoring, set up an action. And in this case, it's going to be, sending out an email to maybe his boss and saying, hey, you want to take a look at Tom? He's doing things that aren't normal. This could be Tom's fault, or this could be some sort of insider threat as well. It could be Tom having being an insider threat as well. You could be CryptoLocker. It could be anything that's compromising his credentials or him as well, that he's doing things that are out of the norm. With a CryptoLocker, you're going to see files being copied extremely fast and then being encrypted. You're going to see things being copied from point A to point B. If he's going out, and Tom in this case, if he's going out and accessing things and copying things over a lot quicker than normally, it's probably not Tom doing it. It's probably not humanly possible to copy things at the speed that he's doing it at. So we're going to allow you to be alerted on those types of abnormalities that are in the environment as well. Now, the group one, this basically allows you to compare a user to a group. So if you have a user that's in a group, let's say a sales group, most of the time those users in that sales group are going to be doing the same thing, pretty close to the same thing. What we're doing here is we're saying, okay, we're going to compare all these users in the group to each other. Now, if a user in this group acts differently or does something differently than the users that are in that group, we want to be alerted on that. So you can see here some of the things that we're monitoring for the activity inside that group. It could be number of sent messages, overall size of emails sent, sentiment. So if anybody starts to do anything different from the group that we're comparing them to, we're going to go ahead once again and have an action of sending an email out to a manager or a boss or whoever the case may be, say, hey, you might want to take a look at Tom once again. He's doing something a little bit different than the rest of the users in the sales group. That could be something that's nefarious, or it could also be something that is just, hey, maybe Tom doesn't belong in this group. He does something different. He maybe should have access to different things in the environment as well. Okay. Now everything inside here, inside of 360, we have some dashboards, some alerts, some reports as well. If you start getting into like the keyword alerts, this allows us to correlate that data that we've collected, give you a graphical representation of what's happening out there, but it'll also let you see things that people are accessing. So if you want to see something like Dropbox, who's accessing Dropbox, we can see who's accessing Dropbox, what they're doing. We also can, excuse me, have a screen capture of that information as well. We can watch what's happening when they go to certain places in the environment. So in this case, we've got some torrents happening here. We can record exactly what's happening on the screen for this user at that time that we've set up this alert for. So as soon as this alert kicks off, we can go ahead and monitor the user's screen and show what's actually happening during that time, whether it be for our internal viewing so that we can figure out what the user was doing, whether it was good or bad, or if we actually need to set up a case and have this stored aside for some sort of legal ramification later on. The one thing that we do have with screenshots that we've added in the latest release, we actually have the ability to go kind of back in time, so to speak. During the actual monitoring process on the workstations or the machines in general, we're actually keeping 30-minute increments of time of what's happening. So if keywords kicked off or some sort of events that kicked off, we can actually go 30 minutes ahead before that and actually see what's happening. So we give you the more of a context of what actually happened. Instead of recording from that time forward, we can actually record 30 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever you stipulate, ahead of that actual action that is taking place or that's kicked off the trigger. Okay. Right. Now we do have some reporting as well. So the Recon dashboard itself, from an anomaly standpoint, when you do get alerts, I just kind of want to show you guys what they would actually look like. Like an everyday alert, you'll receive an email, basically tells you, in this case, Tara, what she's done that's not normal, what is normal. These could be sent to your inbox. This can be sent to your emails. It could be sent to a group of emails if you needed to as well, or they could just be sent inside here as a report that you can come in and view if you needed to. All right. So from Veriata 360 and Recon, that's basically the gist of our user behavioral analytics. We can get into a little bit more detail if you guys, if anybody ever wants to come in and have a more detailed demo on the application itself. We also can do proof of concepts for customers as well. So with that, I'll switch it back to, I believe, Nick, and Nick could kind of wrap things up and answer some questions that anybody might have out there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, Derek. Guys, great presentations. Appreciate that very much. So let's do this, guys. We got some questions that are already in the Q&A box. If any of the conversation today has piqued your interest and there's a question you might have, by all means, put those in the Q&A box. Be happy to answer those. We got about 5 minutes left. Got a couple of questions already in there. I'm going to start with one from Charles, and he says, he's asking, how do I consistently reduce my incident response time? Thoughts on that, either of you?
Yes, hi Charles, this is Derek. First, let me say this. When I was an agent, man, if I had this kind of tool where I can record this stuff and see what was happening beforehand, my job would have been a lot easier. But to your question, Charles, one of the things that I spoke about in my presentation is being ready and knowing what's happening, knowing the who, what, where, when, why, and how, which is what we had to do as investigators. So my first thing to you is having something in place where you said reduce time, right? The way to reduce time is know that you have a problem. So having something in place where, first of all, you prevent the problem from occurring in the first place. Once you have a problem, you can respond to it very quickly. And the third piece is having the correct skills in order to get it done. You know, I mentioned forensics teams and all that. So having the right people, your normal IT folks, even your normal security folks are not sometimes ready to deal with security incidents. So if you want to respond quicker, have the right skills in place to be able to respond, or have a solution in place with an outside vendor where they can get there quickly and deal with the problems as soon as they come up. That's my piece. Mike?
No, I agree with that. That's essentially along the lines of what I would say as well. So,
Thanks, Charles. Nick, anyone else?
Sorry, I put myself on mute instead of taking myself off of mute. Apologies. So the next question is, what should our incident response plan be for a virus or any kind of attack like that?
This is Derek. I'll take that first. And basically, I'm going back to the presentation again. There's four main things that I think you need to have in place, and not just for a virus, but any type of incident or attack that you have. You need to be able to, number one, detect it. Number two, you need to be able to contain it some kind of way. You want to do an analysis to see what happened. You want to do notifications to the folks that need to get them. Don't wait a year like they did with Uber. And here's the thing that I didn't have in my presentation, and you have to improve. You have to put measures in place, fixes in place to fix the problem that caused that breach in the first place, that incident in the first place. Mike?
yeah, I'm going to go with your 4 pillars. That sounds about right. So,
Mike makes this easy for me.
oh yeah.
That's good. Maybe you're making it easy for Mike. I like that better. The next question is, what's the difference between incident response management and disaster recovery? Interesting kind of twist on the topic.
Well, see, here's the thing. People look at incident response and they look at disaster recovery, and sometimes they lump them together and don't understand them. So let me just kind of break it down real quick in 30 seconds. When you respond to an incident, there should always be what they call a recurrent assessment loop that's going to determine whether or not that incident is critical enough for you to warrant some type of disaster recovery activation. So remember I told you earlier that you have to make sure that you really do have an incident. We're going to have activities that's happening, but they might not meet your specification of an incident. And that's going to be up to each one of you all. It depends on what your organizational policy is. In that policy, you identify what an incident is. Then you determine whether it's an incident or not. Once you do that, that's when you move into disaster recovery mode. So your disaster recovery procedure activation is going to mean more resources have to come into place for that incident, and that you're going to have to probably spend more time, more days. Management is going to have to be involved. You have to put your story out to the public, all that. So the severity of that incident that you have is going to determine your appropriate response. Is it just an incident response, or is it now recovering from a disaster? That's my take on that.
Right, and I think also your disaster recovery is going to be dictated based on the type of incident that it is as well, so that'll change based on the incidences that are out there. So,
back to you, Nick.
All right, cool. Let's go back to the next question here. Can you outline actions to take in response to security incidents? I know you talked about this a little bit, but maybe just go back over that again, Derek.
Yeah, I know I'm beating a dead horse here. But again, you know, and Charles asked, how can he consistently do this and increase his time? By having those 4 pillars, matter of fact, those 5 pillars in place. I'm going to put 6 in there. Prevent it, detect it, contain it, analyze it, notify the right people, and then improve. Do your lessons learned and improve. That's how you're going to take the right actions. That's my outline, those 6 steps.
All right, excellent. So it looks like we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and make sure we respect the audience's time and close things out for today. Mike and Derek, thank you guys very much for some great presentations today. Provided a lot of insight and a lot of detail. So thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank everybody for attending. I hope to see you soon. have a happy holiday, everybody, too.
Yeah, so you guys in the audience, thanks for your attention today. Thanks for the questions that you asked. And if someone didn't get to a question, see a couple of them are just sort of piping in right now as we're wrapping things up. Someone from Verout will reach out to you, make sure they answer your question. So thank you guys for your attention today. Hope you learned something, and we'll catch you on the next webcast. This concludes today's webcast.